Dubey Sahab, you can unmute and speak.
Yes, I have done that. Roshan, you can also unmute yourself. Okay, so good morning, friends. It's a pleasure to be back again this Sunday. And I'm sorry I was absent for last 2 Sundays because we had foundation meetings. And I want to give a very warm welcome to Dr. Roshen Dalal, who has kindly agreed to be with us today and speak on a topic which is very close to all of our heart because it relates to education. So she is going to talk on to flower in goodness, education in Krishnamurti schools in theory and practice. Many of us have heard about Roshan Dalal, but I'll briefly introduce her. She is a person of uh, great scholarship. She is the author of 12 books, which include the best-selling two-volume Puffin History of India and the Puffin History of the World, both in 2 volumes. The Religions of India, a concise guide to 9 major faiths, Hinduism, an alphabetical guide, the Vedas, an introduction to Hinduism sacred texts, the 110 Upanishads, to compact timeline history of the world, India at 70, snapshots since independence, and latest book perhaps, J. Krishnamurti, A Life of Compassion Beyond Boundaries, and one novel, The Guru Who Came Down from the Mountain. Currently, she is completing a book on Sri Aurobindo and is also engaged in historical research. Apart from books, she has written a number of articles and reviews. And as Dr. Dalal just mentioned, she has completed the book on Aurobindo. She has a PhD in ancient Indian history from JNU in the specialized field of historical geography. She has taught both at schools and universities. Some of you may know that she has been a teacher at Rishi Valley School and worked for many years as an editor. Born in Mussoorie, Roshanji now is settled in Dehradun. I think with these words, I'll once again welcome Dr. Roshen Dalal. And Roshanji, our format is that you can take about an hour or even less if you want to.
Oh.
And then after you are through, we'll invite questions and question and answer session. And in all our, this program runs for about 90 minutes. But we are not very rigid, a few minutes this way or that way, it doesn't really matter much. But we try and finish within 90 minutes. That has been the schedule so far. So welcome again, and you can begin your lecture now, Roshanji.
Oh, can you, good morning, can you hear?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Thank you so much for inviting me here and for the introduction. So today I'll be speaking about education, of course, in the context of Krishna ji, but also to see what more can be done to bring about, as he had said, a new human being. So we find that Krishnamurti's views can be, or Krishnamurti, the way we look at Krishnamurti can be divided into two. That is, one is his talk all over the world, and the other are his educational institutions, which are fixed spaces where his talks, where his thought is lived. We try very hard to live his teachings within these schools. So as you all know, that he really wanted to bring about a change in the world. He said it was an insane world, an insane society, and he wanted a change. The change would come through each individual changing, getting to know oneself, and seeing the oddities or the difficulties that you face and getting transformed. But this did not seem to be happening. And Krishna ji therefore focused a lot on the schools, whereby if young children are introduced to his ideas, perhaps a change would take place. Now, I'm sure all of you are familiar with it, but with his thoughts on education, but I would still like to give a little bit of background. I think his thoughts on education actually began with his own life. He suffered through changes in many schools, and his last school in Madras was particularly bad. Some of you may not know that his father actually was very well educated. Theosophists have painted a slightly wrong picture of him. He even had a certificate education. And when his teacher in Madras, Krishnaji Madras, was constantly beating him up, he removed him from the school and he planned to teach him himself. But by that time, they were already visiting the Theosophical Society, and he had already come under Leadbeater's who had decided he was the future Messiah. Therefore, Leadbeater offered to teach him, and his father agreed. This all I am sure you already know. But the very first book he wrote on education, the very first book he wrote, or perhaps he did not write, was within just 1 year of his being taught by Leadbeater and many others in the Theosophical Society. This was that famous book, At the Feet of the Master, was the first thing. Perhaps he did not write it at all. But thereafter, he did write a book which was called Education as Service. So these were his very early thoughts on education. He was just 17 years old at the time. And he mentioned that he appreciated the inputs of both George Arundel and Annie Besant. And this rather short book, but very written, well thought out. He put forward certain conditions for the teacher. And these are not something which were totally dropped later on. So teacher should have love, discrimination, desirelessness, not have personal desires, and should have good conduct. I'm sure these are universal qualities for all teachers. But this was a very early beginning. After he left the Theosophical Society in 1929, he often spoke about it, but his thoughts were not collected in a book until much later. He did make many speeches, but where he included his ideas on education, but it was considerably later that these were put together. And by now, of course, we have numerous books. We have his Education and the Significance of Life, Krishnamurti on education, and there are many others. And a very recent, rather 2018, is J. Krishnamurti and Educational Practice, which is a very interesting book for those interested in practical experiments in schools. It's published by OUP and has a number of articles on current experiments going on in Krishnamurti's schools. So when he spoke about schools, he said that he wanted to create, if not create is not the right word, but he wanted somehow to bring about a new human being. This human being would be intelligent in a very different way. Intelligence did not include necessarily book knowledge. It was not that he was against book knowledge, but book knowledge should not be something primary. Knowledge, in fact, should not be the primary aim of the school. And he laid a lot of emphasis also on how the children should be guided and what the teachers should do. Now, the teacher should come together, he said, voluntarily. They should not be appointed or called, but they should be a group who came together voluntarily, and they began teaching, with an aim in mind, the aim to create or to help the child to grow into a good person. Of course, he said many things over the years which may be different, but these were among what he said, that you should not have a teacher who is looking to a teaching career as a source of livelihood. There should be a different motivation. And the motivation should bring out that essential goodness in a person. There should, of course, be no atmosphere of fear. There should be love. The teacher should look on each student with love. And competition, of course, should not be there. So I would like to just read a few passages where he explains all this, which are in my book. As he says, a school should not be run with authority. The teachers should not be dominated by the principal. In a group of true educators, the problem of authority will never arise. And those who are dedicated to education in the true sense do not have to be told anything. They would see for themselves what was required and make necessary adjustments. But the teacher should be absolutely sure that this is what they want, this is their vocation. Teacher should study and understand each student using love and patience. But to start with, of course, the teacher himself or herself has to have understood his conditioning and to have gone beyond it. This is something which is extremely difficult. I know that we now have training courses for teachers, but even a training course cannot get the teacher to look within, understand their own conditioning, and move beyond. So this is not, there is a lot of literature on schools. You would find similarities with Krishnamurti, yet his views were somewhat different. So when he was speaking in Rishi Valley in 1961, he says, we must be very clear in ourselves what we want. Clear what a human being must be. The total human being, not just the technological being. We do not just make the child clever, proficient in acquiring knowledge, while we neglect the other side. And the other side is goodness. The child, he says, must be established in goodness, inwardly and outwardly, by the time they leave the school. Now, I would like you to keep this in mind, and those who have been in schools to see, has this been possible in children? Children should be very sensitive. You should not, just learn mathematics, but you should be able to look at the sky, the earth, the trees, be sensitive to nature. He also explains what he means by freedom. There should be freedom, but very often this is misunderstood. Freedom means order, giving one's heart to something. Because you are free and you understand freedom, you will be punctual in your class, and from freedom you will talk to the student. So all these things have to be internalized and understood at a very deep level for the teacher before they come to the classroom. Yet when we teach, we are faced, at least in Rishi Valley and perhaps in many other schools, by the time you reach class 9, you are faced with the impending examination and the syllabus. So somehow or the other, these two things have to be balanced. Bring out goodness and sensitivity in the person, and at the same time, to give them an adequate understanding of the subjects that they require, for life. Now, he also said that we have to end thought. But how do you get a child to understand this? You have to examine, every thought that comes to you and see if you can use thought only when it was necessary. So these are some of the kind of, we may say, general theories which may be rather difficult to implement, but there are also some very specific things he said which have been implemented. For instance, he said, we must choose areas for schools which are far away from the city and which have natural beauty. I think this has been done in every single school. Every single school is in an area of natural beauty and not very close to the city. Perhaps closest to habitation perhaps is Rajghat, but I think all the others are somewhat separated. Then he said that you also must have a small school. We don't want huge schools. This again, I think, has more or less been implemented. We find schools here with thousands of children, but Krishnamurti schools have a limited number and a high number of teachers in proportion to this. Now, what I would like to do further today is, after reaching Rishi Valley and after coming to Dehradun, I have visited a number of schools here who have asked me to give talks on something or the other. And the contrast between Rishi Valley particularly and these schools has been very clear. The openness of the atmosphere in Rishi Valley, the freedom of students, their own sense of responsibility, I've not really seen in any other schools. Nevertheless, there are many things which we could perhaps still improve. I have kept in touch with students and some teachers and have seen, a lot that is being written these days on the schools and a lot of questions that are being raised. Before we get into that, I would like to look at two historical aspects of the Krishnamurti schools. When I taught in Rishi Valley, I also wrote a history of the Rishi Valley school, for which I interviewed innumerable people in then Madras, now Chennai, and in mainly in Madras, Bangalore, and a few other places. So I came across this very interesting, out of this, I would like to give you an idea of what was the very first phase of Rishi Valley life. Some of you may already know it, you may have heard of it, but let us bring it up again. Rishi Valley actually started out as a theosophical school in Madras, in the Gindi area. And meanwhile, theosophists were busy buying land in what was Tektu Valley, which would later become Rishi Valley. And when a huge storm blew down most of the buildings in Gindi, Madras, it was decided between Krishnamurti and the then principal Subba Rao to move the school in its entirety to the Rishi Valley land. Thus, in 1931, 95 students and several teachers moved to a place which was still under construction, rather wild, with wild animals, plenty of snakes, and very few buildings. Buildings were being built by the engineers who had dedicated their lives first to theosophy and then to Krishnaji. The dedication of these people, I think, can never be emulated in later times. These people gave their lives to building the school without taking any money. And in fact, some of the engineers put all their own pension and profits into the buildings. Subba Rao himself was an extraordinary person with a double MA. He had been sent to learn about different schools by Annie Besant, progressive schools, and he came back full of ideas. Where it was almost unknown, he brought a set of Madame Montessori materials. He had it duplicated by the carpenter, and these were used in the school. He also had these extremely advanced ideas on what should be done. Now, finally, when the school began running in Rishi Valley, still with very poor facilities, electricity came later. They used Petromax lamps. Initially, they had half-built buildings which they slept in. There was a parapet wall on one side, a wall on the other side. The only absolutely pakka building was the one school building. So they braved all these circumstances. And the school in Guindy was in Tamil medium. When it came to Rishi Valley in Andhra Pradesh, there were two streams, Tamil and Telugu medium. Now, this is interesting that it is in pre-independence days. We have a Tamil and Telugu medium school. Later, a third stream, Kannada, was also added. Subba Rao worked out every little point in such detail that I think no one before or after could have done. He decided, of course, what the teachers should do. They should all wake up by 5 a.m. and they should be ready to receive either the children or to sit and contemplate what they were going to do. They should dedicate their lives. He was not keen on anybody getting married. So some of his teachers did, but many did not. They should dedicate their lives to teaching and to the children. They should know each child. They should sit in the evening and think over how they could improve, how they could remedy the lives of every child. What were their plus points? What were their minus points? And what could they do to improve their lives? Education was in a kind of graded system. Like most of the children, they worked on their own with guidance. Many of the things that are used today in Rishi Valley, like extensive reporting, were actually put into place long ago by Subba Rao. They were not only academic subjects. He brought in dance, music, craft, dance and music open to boys, which was very rare in those days. It was a school free of fear, but it was absolutely disciplined. It was not that they were free to do anything, but his method of discipline was to talk to them and convince them that it was the right thing. Not everyone was convinced all the time, but by and large, things worked. Everyone had a cold water bath in the morning. I met many of these students in their perhaps old age in Madras, and they all said, okay, Rishi Valley gave us confidence, made us hardy, we don't get ill, and we have confidence in every situation. The other great innovation at this time, please remember we are talking of the 1930s. Even today we have caste and religious problems. We'll come to that later. But in those days that everybody ate together and sat down for meals together of all castes and all religions was also something which of course had been started by theosophists, but something which was unique in those times, in those areas particularly. So, at that time when I was in Rishi Valley, I had met the son of one of the engineer Raj Gopal Iyengar. His son Nityanand often visited and he told stories of those days. And one of his stories was about his sister who married a Muslim. And his father, of course, had no problems because first with theosophy and then with Krishnamurti, they had dropped all these ideas of caste and religion. But he said that whenever his father visited his relatives, they would not allow him to enter the house. He would be served in clay pots, which would be broken after he used them, after he drank his tea, and then the veranda would be washed to eliminate his polluting presence, only because his daughter had married a Muslim, not that she had visited. So this is the conditions in which they created this school where everyone was equal. The food was, of course, vegetarian, and it was limited in those days. Children were given like 2 rotis, and when they protested that we want more, Subbarao sat down with them and explained how to chew slowly, and therefore they would be satisfied. But some of the children told me, I mean, not children, but they were grown up, they did tell me that we used to go to the village and barter our clothes for extra to eat. And when we returned home, parents would be surprised, where are our clothes gone? And that too was restricted. They were only allowed 6 pairs of clothes. In those days, parents were more sensible. They didn't secretly give them money. So their only thing when they were starving was not starving, of course, they were well fed, but anyone who works with teenagers will know how their appetites are. They would exchange one of their shirts or socks or something for some basket of guavas or something from the village. Subbarao wanted to make them open-minded. So he set out 8 series of graded excursions. Each excursions would start when they were in a lower class. By the time they reached the highest class, they would have gone all over India. They would have looked at churches, mosques, gurdwaras, temples, and visited the main sites throughout India. Then they also had this 1 month where they celebrated with dance, music, and theater. It was a very big part of the year. Everybody prepared for it and celebrated with this. Subbarao also ordered books, whether they were useful or not. The library, according to some students, it had 1 lakh books, but it was not probably 1 lakh. But the correct information is there were about 30,000 books, and there were books of all kinds. Students were free to go, to read, to browse. There were magazines on architecture, on journals, on psychology. There was everything possible over there. This grand experiment, unfortunately, which I feel was one of the best periods of the school, came to an untimely end when the British decided to invade it and found communist literature. Evidently, some local boys were not happy and had tipped them off that there was communist literature in the library. So in 1941, there was a raid and a few students and teachers were arrested, later released on some bonds. And this early phase of the school came to an end. The school continued for some time, but it was in very poor shape till it finally closed down around 1948-49 and was reopened in 1950-51 by Mr. Pierce as an English medium school. But what I would like to just bring out here is that these early students are the ones who without fail said to me, I must have met at least 20 of these students, if not more. All of them who were perhaps in their 70s by that time, 60s, 70s, 80s, all of them said, we came out of there with confidence, with absolutely no discrimination against any caste or any religion. We see everybody as the same. and we have no problems, living in life. We have never faced a problem. I don't think any other batch of students has said that in the same way. These were all, and many of them are the rather conventional Tamil Brahmins, but they had got out of all the convention. They had dropped this conditioning. Whether they look like, I cannot say in a few meetings whether they are good human beings or not, but definitely they were good in this sense. They had no discriminatory practices, which still continued today. And this was the result of that very first phase of the school. So I would like to, bring out one more very different aspect of education, which was David Hosper's efforts in his rural school. David Hosper, of course, had joined Rishi Valley in the second phase of the school when it became an English medium school run by Mr. Pierce. David Hosper was an Englishman. He had prior experience in different areas, but he was highly eccentric. Though extremely disciplined in his teachings, he was disciplined in his teachings, but rather an eccentric man. One of the students of Rishi Valley, former students, told me how he came to the school. He arrived there with his wife, children, followed by a goat. He was always barefoot. He had this goat and perhaps a dog in tow. He was always barefoot and he always wore shorts. And he got this special permission from the principal and the school that he could smoke a hookah also. But despite this, he was an absolutely brilliant educationist. He took in Rishi Valley, he could do everything. He was just modeling, carpentry, English. He taught everything. And in his teachings, he demanded excellence. But his work seems to have been quite extraordinary. He was not the only extraordinary person there at that time. There were other extraordinary teachers. But I'm giving his background because I was going on to describe what he did in Neelbagh, in the rural school. After this phase of the school also collapsed around 1958, which it collapsed for very different reasons. So maybe I'll give 2 minutes on this aspect of the school. This aspect of the school, when Mr. Pierce founded it, Mr. Pierce was an Englishman with a background in education. He founded a school which he believed everybody should be free. He again tried to put Krishnamurti's ideas into practice. Everyone should be free, should have the freedom to learn at their own pace. But among the most noted teachers at that time were not only David Hosper, but Sardar Mohammed, and there were many others who were excellent teachers. But gradually, conventional, perhaps Rishi Valley trust people or conventional parents began to feel that things were going a little wild, that there was insufficient, when they came to the school, they would find the children on trees or somewhere else playing. Children were learning and they produced some very brilliant people from this time, but it didn't seem like that either to the parents or to the trust. Mr. Pierce was not someone who could assert his authority. He kept trying different things. Sorry if there's a background noise, it's a garbage truck. But he kept on trying different things. He had a collective group to try and decide what to do. He had individuals assigned to different tasks. Somehow or the other, no one was happy with I mean, children were very happy. Some of the teachers were happy, but there was a conflict between two groups of teachers. And this experiment in Rishi Valley came to an end around 1958, where then I think Dr. Balasundaram took over and gave the school its present shape and form. But David Horsburgh then left and he organized the school in Neelbagh School, which I think is just across the border. So it was for rural children, both Kannada and Telugu speaking. There were no rules. You come if you like, don't come if you don't like. And when you come, there's teaching going on of all kinds. He had a few helpers. Now, what is very significant here is that it is in this school that he totally, transformed these rural children. They all became fluent in English. They went on to do a variety of different things. One of them was an air hostess. Some went abroad. One was a computer scientist. But once again, people raised questions about this. Before that, I would just narrate a very small incident. When I was one day walking into the Rishi Valley village, I was greeted by one man there. He stopped me and he said in perfect English, he was a normal villager, perfect English with a rather English accent. He said to me, I believe you are writing the history of Rishi Valley School. He said it in an accent that I don't have. You know, it was an absolutely English accent. So I looked at this man in his lungi and, looking like any other villager. And I didn't want to insult him by saying, many spoke English, but in the school, many of the workers spoke English. They had picked it up from the children, but nobody spoke like him with this extremely sophisticated English accent. So, I was just looking at him and I just said, yes. And how do you know? And he said, as a child, I stayed all in this English accent. I stayed with David Horsburgh for some time. And I learned all this from him. I even took part in some Shakespearean plays. So this was his ability that he could take anyone and create, this highly educated, doesn't matter whether they had a degree or not, but they were thinking differently. They were educated. They were able to read and English also. However, to get back to that point, when we have these children, moving away from their origins and becoming, as I said, one was an air hostess, computer scientist, some were teachers, some got back into the school and began teaching. One day, a question was raised to Krishnamurti. I think you will find this passage in Krishnamurti at Rajghat, which is that book put together of some of his talks at Rajghat. The question was raised, why are they going away from the village? They should return to their roots. Now, this is a very interesting question because we never tell our elite English-speaking students, why don't you return to your roots and go back to your village? So why is there this attitude that children who come from a village should go back to their roots and only improve the village? We don't say this to any of the children in the English-speaking schools. But Krishnamurti gave a perfect answer. I won't be able to find the passage, but I'll give you the gist of it. He said, it's not a question of the village or of the town. Why should they go back to the hell that is the village? Which does not mean they have to go into a hell that is a town. But you have to teach them, you have to show them that both have you have to show them the problems that exist in both. And then it is their choice what they feel like doing. He said, don't give them a color that you think they ought to have. It is for them to decide. Once you have educated them rightly, they are free to do whatever they want. But this passage somehow stayed in my mind because very often we have a different attitude towards rural education and a different attitude towards the elite schools. So now I would like to go a little further. I've recently been seeing a number of slightly, I would say, critical letters, essays on the schools. And we need to perhaps take into consideration the changing times when we look at education. Education, the life is very different from the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 80s, and 90s also. Life is very different today. The way the internet and social media have exploded everywhere, you can't expect urban children to be the same as they were some generations ago. They are very smart. They know what is happening. And they also get a lot of nonsense from the internet and come up with nonsensical ideas. So one of the two things I would like to bring in here is one is this question of knowledge. Krishnamurti was always saying, no, he did say knowledge is important, but he said knowledge is only important in order to allow you to live your life in the right way. Otherwise, you should not focus too much on knowledge. At times, he even said that knowledge, you are sustaining your ego through acquiring knowledge. But in today's world where we are being inundated with fake knowledge, I think every teacher should be giving a lot of emphasis to what is true knowledge. In the sphere of history, I'm just appalled by the sort of things that keep coming up, the questions that are raised that would keep circulating. Some obscure person would say, why is he not in the history books? Why is this person not there? Why are the Mughals given importance? Why isn't Lalit Aditya Muktaditya from Kashmir given more importance? The thing is, everything has a balance. If someone is ruling over a large part of the country, they have to be given importance than more importance than a Kashmiri king. This is just one example, who ruled for about 20 years in some part of North India and did not have a good hold of it. What I'm trying to say here is, in today's world, correct knowledge is very, very important. So the focus should not be just on making a sensitive child, but on giving them up-to-date knowledge. This can be done also, by equating, for instance, in physics, we do find that in the realm of quantum physics, we can equate some of Krishnaji's ideas of time, for instance, with the ideas in quantum physics. And this could be something also that is taught in schools and brought out clearly. I've gone into this also in my book, that is Conversations with Scientists, where he definitely had adequate knowledge, considerable knowledge to discuss deeply with them. So he himself had a very broad mind. He may not have been good at passing exams, but that's not a criteria of this broad intelligence that he had. So one of the things we have to focus on is knowledge. When we see the rise of caste differences and religious differences today, it's not enough to tell them, sit down in the dining hall and eat together. That's not sufficient anymore. We have to go into it in more depth. My suggestion would be, though many may differ over here, is they should get an understanding of each religion, the principles of each religion, so that they see that the ideas behind each religion are not that different. Whether this is a good idea or not, I don't know, but it's something for all of you to consider. Because without this, they have these weird ideas which they pick up from WhatsApp University about whichever religion it be. If they were actually taught something from scholarly texts, maybe they would not fall prey to this. The other main aspect, which not main aspect, but another aspect that is being brought out today is food. Somebody wrote an article or a letter, I'm not sure what, but it was widely circulated that why are the schools vegetarian? It's a caste problem. This was what was said. So these are the things that should be very carefully addressed. Everyone knows it has vegetarianism in Krishnamurti schools has nothing to do with caste. It has to do with compassion. But how do we teach them compassion? Not teach them. How do we get them to have this compassion for animals by which they will not want to eat the food? This person brought out in this letter, I recollect that some students ate non-veg food when on some excursion. I don't remember the details, but I remember this. And they were scolded by the teacher and told this was against the ethics of the school. I can't even remember which school it was, but it was fairly recent. So this is where we have to be very careful. We want the children, as Krishnamurti said, to be good human beings. A good human being, to my mind and to his also, respects nature, respects animals, respects all that is around. He had often spoken against eating animals and against killing them. But maybe we have to go beyond him to get the children to understand what compassion is and why compassion should be there. Maybe they should be taken to some farms or shown some films on the violence that goes on when animals are killed, or in some way sensitized. We could do with a lot of ideas on this, but they should understand that how one lives in harmony with life, and that vegetarianism has nothing to do, it may have something to do with caste in other areas, but certainly in Krishnamurti schools, it has nothing to do with caste. So this is one of the things that we need to consider. We need to see how the children are being influenced by this mass media pouring on them all the time. Maybe it's limited when they are in residence and schools, but as soon as they get out of the school, when they go home, you know how cities are and how media is and what they are going through. One more aspect we need to look at is we must study, not just depend on Krishnamurti, but we must also be aware of the stages of growth of a child. There are things you can tell a child when they are small, and there are things they will understand only when they are older. And if you have understood a teenage child, I mean, teenagers, we have to understand, are going through all sorts of hormonal changes. They themselves aren't aware of what is happening. One has to deal with them differently. The ideal is very great, but in practice, those who work in schools, you will know in practice the innumerable problems that come up every day. What do you do, when senior children fall in love just because it's a phase of their life? These are questions that need to be also looked at and answered. How does one deal with these things? I'd like to bring in one more person who had commented on all the things that should be discussed in school. I think the schools have a lot of discussion on what they should do, where they should go, how they should live. But here, this is one M. Grimmett. He has written on education in religious education, and he has brought out certain topics which need to be discussed. So he has said, peace. How would you have a discussion on peace? Like, what is peace? We want peace in the world. Krishna ji also frequently spoke about the need for peace and how it comes from within each one of us. In fact, there's a very interesting passage when he was asked about Gandhiji's death. He happened to be in India at that time when Gandhiji was assassinated, and he was asked, what do you have to say about this? He said, this incident is a result of the violence that exists in each one of you. Unless we have overcome the violence within, we cannot expect a different world. This is somewhat to the effect of what he said. I'm not exactly reading out or quoting, but he said something to this effect. So once again, we come back to this. Do the children, when they leave the school, do they have an aim? Do they have an aim to bring about a peaceful world? Can we at least give them this aim when by the time they leave school? Are they clear in their aim that we don't just want success? We don't just want money and a brilliant life with fancy cars and houses. We also want a world of peace. How do we build this about? Bring this about? What are the qualities in ourselves that have to be there? And we need to analyze this further. There was again, I think a couple of years ago, one student from Rishi Valley who had got 99% in the 12th class boards. Everybody, rushed to congratulate him and to therefore say how great Rishi Valley was. But again, this is not the aim of Rishi Valley to get 99%. Any school can do that. So one has to, from teachers to students, one has to be very clear in their aims. What is the aim of the school? It's not to get 99%. It's not to give you a brilliant job. All that may follow. It doesn't mean you shouldn't have that. It's not to make you number one in the tennis tournament. Everything should be there. But behind all that, there should be something else. It should be a innate goodness. That is what Kay wanted, that every child should leave school with an innate goodness. And somewhere along the way, we perhaps lose focus of this. The other question before I go back to Grimmett and his list of what should be discussed in schools is how do we ensure that these youngsters leaving school are able to cope with the outer world? This is also very important. We have seen many students from Rishi Valley go out and find themselves at a loss in this cutthroat competitive world that they then face. Some go into depression. I know of one very, very tragic case of suicide of a very brilliant girl who was in Oxford at that time, who had passed out of Rishi Valley. Is there some way we can also give them an emotional strength? Can we look at these things also? And for all this, we must look at K's teachings, but we must also go beyond it and look at what more can we do. After all, K's teachings are not sacrosanct. The only most important thing is, are we helping to bring about a good human being? so that the whole world can be a better place. Now, before I end, I would just like to give this list of what Grimmett says, which I think all teachers should have a look at, how we can discuss. Peace I mentioned and then went off on a tangent. So he says, evil. Can we look at evil? Now, this whole problem of what is evil, it's very interesting also that though Krishnamurti never in his talk spoke about evil, he did speak about it to his close associates, and he had an awareness of some forces of this kind, even though he never openly spoke about it, but his associates know. I'm sure everybody knows the story of how he went to the Tetu temple beyond Rishi Valley, and the deity there followed him back, and he told her, go back, don't come. He also said that, Rishi Valley is a protected land, but beyond it, it is not so. So he did have this concept. So evil is something, anyway, we may have different concepts. Does it exist? Does it not exist? Then he says violence. We should discuss violence. How does one live in a world which is violent without being violent oneself? Then these very important things of anxiety. How do you cope with anxiety and fear? Not merely in the school, but when you go out of the school. Then compassion. What gives meaning to life? He also said we must discuss suffering, family conflicts. Very many of our students come to school with dysfunctional families behind them. Can these also be discussed openly? Can we discuss fear? Can we discuss problems? Then reconciliation. How does reconciliation take place after a conflict? He also suggests discussing accidents. What happens? Then he says, discuss death and discuss scandals. There is something more also in this, but I think these are topics we should keep in mind to discuss, whether we are visiting a school to talk or whether we are teaching in a school. It is only if a child has confidence, has some kind of inner goodness which gives that confidence, which has got over fear and anxiety in dealing with life, then the schools would have done something more. As it is, as I said, when you go to city schools and you look at these schools, my closest association is with Rishi Valley, but I've visited Rajghat and I have spent a couple of weeks in Valley School. Valley School was also in those days a very innovative and happy place. Other schools I have less interaction, but all these things, when we are teaching in a Krishnamurti school, or when we who have been influenced by Krishnamurti go and talk in another school, the focus has to be Krishnamurti's original focus. How do we create a good human being, or at least a better human being? Create, of course, is a very wrong word because everyone is developing on their own. How do we enable a child to develop the better qualities, to gain confidence, to face the world, to be successful, and yet not to be someone violent, vindictive, angry? Is it at all possible? So I think I would like to now hear from others and rather respond to questions. Anyone wants to read more, you can read in my book where I have brought out more examples. But I think education is a burning issue. Kay often said we must have a passion about it. It should be a burning passion within us, because education is the future. It is these children who will be there, who will take India and the world to a different place, what place we don't yet know. So we have to focus on this, whether it be through occasional talks or whether it be actually through living in a school and discussing constantly with each other, with one another, with the students. How do we get a student who does not live in the world with anxiety, fear, violence, who has some kind of inner peace by the time they leave, and yet who can cope with the crazy pressures of the world today? So I would like to have some other people now.
Thank you, Roshen ji, for a beautiful discourse. You brought in some of the important issues with which the Krishnamurti schools are grappling with. But being associated with Rajghat Patient School for a long time, and also being associated with many other KFI schools, not for a longer period, but occasional visits and so on, we are trying to bring in what Krishnaji said the intent of the schools are, or what is the purpose of education. One very important aspect that you mentioned, which emphasized a great deal and with great emphasis, the flowering of goodness in children. Now, we create an atmosphere where by the way we deal with children, our own understanding of what Krishna is talking about, we discuss that. But the idea is to put the seed in the child and not give him an answer for these questions, like simplicity, listening to each other, working together. How do you love nature? These are issues which are very, very important part of our life. But unfortunate part is that even though Krishna was very emphatic about the purpose of education, they are immeasurable. How do you measure goodness? And my own experience in Rajghat has been that we had visits from, principals of about 12 schools in Bhutan who had come. We also had visitors from one of the affiliated colleges of Delhi University who had come and wanted to study the impact of Krishnamurti's education in Rajghat. And all of them said that children were different than the other school children. That we also say, but how do you measure that somebody has really flowered in goodness? Those are issues which are, if I try to explain, it becomes very, very subjective. I have other more experienced teachers. I would like them to say something, but thank you for bringing all those issues. Another thing that I just forgot I mentioned, when children come to our school, depending on the kind of family they come from, many of them are non-vegetarians. They eat meat at home and suddenly they come to school and we say we are vegetarians. So when they grow up, we had cases in Rajghat where they will sneak out in the night, go out and eat chicken and come back. And sometimes they will, pay some money to a staff and they will buy things, non-vegetarian stuff and quietly give it to them. Cases of that kind do come quite regularly in many of our schools. But I think the idea is not to indoctrinate them, but to just let them see why we want them to be vegetarians. As you have yourself mentioned, bring that. And I think it's a very good idea that we take them to some of the animal farms and show them the kind of cruelty that is being heaped on birds and animals and so on. That will perhaps be very, very useful. Now I'll request Harshji, who has been a teacher for a very long time, to say something, and then Harshad Bhai. Harshji, please unmute yourself, sir.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Roshenji said a lot. She said a wide range of things, and it's difficult for me to pick out something. So maybe what I will say is be more of an addition rather than a comment on what she's saying. And knowing that Roshenji is in Dehradun, I'm sure we can get together and have long discussions about education. Yeah. So just briefly, one or two things that I might say. Some of the ways that we think about things is in terms of content, which is we could take them to abattoirs, or we could show them this, or we could teach them about this or about that, have questions about compassion or discompassion. These are all questions of content. But what became clear, certainly to me, is that what Krishnaji was laying much more stress on in these many words. On the day before, students would be due to arrive in the school. The question was not what will you teach them, but how will you approach them? So even these discussions, how are you going to approach these discussions? Because it's your approach that is going to be the more important part, not the content. You can take any content. You can take the history of the world. You can be teaching a history class, but how will you approach the facts, say, of Indian independence? What happened then? I remember in my school, we were taught out of a book written by an Englishman in India, of course, a long time ago, back in the 50s. So it was much later that I realized that the history of India that I had learned was seen from a British perspective. They say history is written by the winners, the victorious. So, and not generally by the losers. So at that time, the British were the victors. So they were writing the history textbooks. So now somebody else today wants to have a very different approach to history. And, there's arguments going on in not just this country, but in the US and here as well, of what should be in textbooks or what shouldn't be in textbooks. But so it becomes important that we should be, whatever the content, whether it's a textbook or whether it's a discussion about Krishnamurti or about certain ideas that we consider important, is how do we approach it? Are we laying down something, or are we actually encouraging inquiry? Are we helping people who are studying history to recognize that history is always taught, always written from somebody's perspective, and everything that we say and do, when we talk about other people, when we recount anything, anytime in our lives, is always done from somebody's perspective, and that their perspective colors everything that is being said. So are they learning this as well? So this is not just the content, not just what happened or discussing what happened. So this extra dimension of the approach and deepening our understanding of what is actually going on is very important. And part of this is also, once again, it's the way we think about things. We talk about the aims of education. Now, words are important because words carry a meaning beyond what you might intend them to straight away. An aim, you aim at a target. You aim at something in the future. Aim is to become something. Even when we talk about the flowering of goodness, we talk about as if somebody becoming a better person. Will the child become good? That's, even if we aren't putting it in those words, very often we are thinking of them that way, that they will become better. One of the things Krishnaji said was, the better is the enemy of the good. So, because this idea that we will psychologically evolve, that we will become better persons, was clearly something he didn't. He obviously was not the way he saw things. So Dubeyji used the word, the intention. Now, intention is a better word, because intention is what you start with, not what you go towards. I start with an intention. And the starting point, where we start from in every aspect, of education. What is it that we're trying to do? So I think it's becoming clear about the starting point and where we need to start from. So, you know, there are in that, as there are certain things as well that I think Krishnamurti was very clear about awakening intelligence. He didn't really want us to lay down anything, not even vegetarianism. It was asked about it. Basically, if I can say very simply what he says he wasn't asking anybody to become a vegetarian. But he said, you're coming to this place, and this place recognizes the sanctity of life. And therefore, like you might be quiet in a library, you're vegetarian while you're here. There was never any insistence that they should be vegetarian outside. And of course, at Brockwood, we always knew that people went out and sneaked out and had non-vegetarian meals when they went out, but that was never the purpose. It was never the purpose to turn them into vegetarian, but for them to recognize that we, the school, had a sense of the sanctity of life. And therefore, that's why we didn't have meat in the schools. So I think once again, it's not that we are trying to get them to do something or get them to become something. And so much of education is like that. But this starting point, and it's very subtle. And it's not, once again, that teachers have already somehow to have understood all this. Once again, he was very clear about this. He was educating as well. And teachers are on the same level as the student. We haven't sorted out our anxieties. We haven't sorted out our relationships. We have just as much difficulty with all of that. So when we come to all of that, we are inquiring with the student, not that we have understood case teachings, or that we have understood ourselves, or that we have resolved our own psychological problems, but that we recognize that it is an important thing to do for us and for the student, and that on this level, I may know more mathematics than the student, but when it comes to this, I'm not an expert on love and compassion, and I'm not an expert on relationships, because it's very clear to them that we have difficulties. So educators don't have to be perfect. They have to have that sense of inquiring into and understanding the self. I think that's about what I want to say. Yeah.
Harshad bhai, please.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Harsh and Roshen. I was teaching in Krishnamurti schools for about 27 years. And after retirement, I have been visiting all these KFI schools. And I was teaching physics and mathematics. Also, I was a housemaster, class teacher, and we used to have many dialogues with students when I was teaching, and also taking culture class, during which we talk about how to live. The most important thing, now first I would like to say that very few teachers join Krishnamurti schools because of their passion for Krishnamurti teachings or living. And most of the parents also don't know anything. And they coming from rich families and they pay very high fees to study in the schools. And so naturally they want their children to get very good marks and do very well in their profession and earn lots of money. But the schools are very good environment, naturally beautiful. And Krishnamurti was coming up to 1986, 85. And the most important topic which we can discuss with students, and Krishnamurti was also discussing, is about relationship. What is the nature of our relationship with other people in the house or in the classroom, on the playfield? What is the nature of relationship between students and teachers, and relationship with nature, and also the relationship with our own thinking which are coming. So the knowledge, there is a lot of knowledge is given to students in Krishnamurti schools of so many subjects and many experts in various fields. They are visiting the school and students are also reading many books. But I think they have a very good intellect. They can discuss very beautifully, but to look inward, I think that is very difficult for most people because our problems, real problems of relationship are coming because we don't understand ourselves, our thinking, how it arising, how anger, fear, jealousy, all these problems. So in that sense, we are lacking, I feel, in Krishnamurti schools because everybody is very busy. Teachers are very busy, students are busy with lots of activities, of various physical activities and intellectual activities. But the real thing, the real knowledge, I feel, is learning about ourselves, how to look and listen, which Krishnamurti used to talk when he was coming. How do you look at a tree? How do you look at your friends? The images, how are built, and listening to the birds and to each other, not getting carried away by our own ideas. And also Krishnamurti was talking about fear, corruption, freedom, order, and all these things, these are much more important. And maybe in the earlier age, when the school started, as Roshen was saying, maybe these things were more important than academic knowledge and intellect. And my impression is that students are very good in intellect, but this intelligence, which is a higher dimension, that means to look at everything with a silent mind, with a clarity, and that is the most important thing. And then other things are taken care of. So in that sense, Krishnamurti himself was not very happy. And even in 1985, last year, when he came and he said, you have spent so much energy on the schools, but is it really worthwhile? And he said, you have not created a single human being who can really stand out with clarity, and that he expected a lot from teachers and students, and he himself was challenging everybody every year he was coming. But the intention, the high intention, which are the intentions of Krishnamurti, and probably I feel not the intentions of teachers and students and parents. And so that's why these schools are good schools. They are rated very highly by from the academic standpoint. Number one, number two schools like that, Rishi Valley, Sayadri School, Rajghat Valley School. But what Krishnamurti wanted, that he himself said that he met many old students of Rishi Valley, and he did not find that there was really anything, a spark where they, how do we look? And that non-verbal looking, that is different than looking everything through intellect and gathering knowledge and having analysis and all that. So I feel that the real thing has not happened in my view and also in Krishnamurti's view. Thank you. I have said enough.
Thank you. Thank you, Harshad Bhai. I think I want to make it clear that the intent of the school is not a goal post to be reached. It's a work in progress. It's like a, lighthouse which gives you direction to navigate. And that's the way it should be taken. It's not that this is the aim and we have reached it now, so there's nothing to be done. I think the learning goes on all the time. And the teacher and students both learn together. That ambience is there in all the KFI schools. I think we can't take much questions now. We have hardly 5-7 minutes. So I'll request Durga ji to say something, and then last question from Mr. Dinesh Waghmare. Yes, Durga ji, please go ahead.
Hello, ma'am. Yeah, good afternoon to you. Yeah. First of all, I just don't have many questions and all. It's very nice listening to you. You brought a lot of inputs and all from the Krishnaji's schools and of course, books we have been reading. But to know so many things about Rishi Valley School, it was really an interesting talk because a lot of teachers who have been associated with Rishi Valley School and other schools, they have got first-hand experience of what it is like. But for me, like, it's never into these schools. It's only by reading books and listening to a few people I just can make out, all this does take place there. So it's very interesting to listen to all those anecdotes and, all the people with whom you have contacted, you have interacted with them and your report and all that. And I think what the previous teachers, these our speakers who are very renowned into this Krishnamurti schools and books and all, they have also brought out very nice points, very valid points in fact. I think it's an ongoing learning process and it's never enough for us to, keep focusing on aspects of life because our dimensions and challenges of life are every day new. They come with new problems and new issues. I think this ongoing learning process is one thing we all need to remember, whether it's a child or a student or a parent or a teacher, in that case. And I also would like to, show my appreciation and admiration to you, ma'am. You have written so many books and so many different subjects. That's quite a, I can say, you can say, appreciable thing. You have published so many books on different subjects. It was really a nice reading about all that. And I just would like to share one small point here. My daughter, after finishing her graduation, one day she asked me this question. By that time, she also started reading Krishnamurti books and all, who had finished her graduation from an engineering college. That time she really started, getting drawn to the teaching or the books and all. One day for vacation, she came home and she asked me, "You started reading Krishnaji from when we were in school and we were in schooling and all. Then why didn't you decide to put us in Krishnamurti schools?" Somehow I didn't have any answer to give to her. But I feel more than anything else, I think it's a question of the attention one gives to the child, the affection, the care, the attention, And I think parents are guides, more of a guides and friends to their children throughout their lives. And maybe those are the points that were in my mind. So I never thought that I should put them in Krishnamurti schools. So, and it's an ongoing journey of learning, whether it is for me or for my daughters. I'm glad at least I was able to create some element of interest in them. Now they have also taken to Krishnamurti's book so much. So I feel that's a contribution in a way from my side. And it's a very great learning experience, ma'am. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I think we should restrict ourselves to asking questions. Dinesh ji, please go ahead. Then we'll have the last word from Harshad.
Roshen ji, do you really feel that the goodness can be cultivated through education? If so, then are we not giving a sort of a new conditioning to the student? Or it's a born trait of a person?
No. I hope I did not imply that goodness can be cultivated through education. It is more like Harsh said, that it is the way we approach them. I think that most of the teachers approach with this love, care, and concern. And we try to understand each child. So I think that is the approach. It is not through subjects that we can do anything, nor do we want to indoctrinate anyone and say that you must be good or you must not be good, and nor, as Harsh put it well, that is not the aim. What we want to do, or rather what I would like to do, everyone has a different view on this, is to create this atmosphere of love and care whereby they feel free to tell you their problems, their concerns. And it is through these discussions that something may emerge. I don't mean to say that we indoctrinate them in any manner or we tell them anything. There are no rules or no regulations on how they should be in life. If they, whatever, that is what Krishnamurti also said. Don't give me a color that you think I ought to have. That was a quote I made in the context of when he was asked about Rajghat. Don't want to tell them what to be or what to be, but encourage them to find within themselves some innate goodness.
Thank you, Roshan ji. I think Harsh ji.
No, it's not really. It's a very simple question. I wanted to ask Roshan ji where she lives in Dehradun.
Okay.
I'm in Jharkhand.
Sorry?
In
Jharkhand. I live in Dalanwala. We can get together. Is there somewhere? I'm sure that Dubey ji can get us in contact with each other.
Harsh ji, I'll send her mobile number to you, then you can get in touch.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
I want to thank Roshan ji profusely for accepting our offer and being with us. I will ask a last question though. Your book on Krishnamurti was reviewed by Dr. David Moody. Did you get a chance to read his review?
I had a look, though it was not sent to me. I did manage to have a look. But I do feel that he has misunderstood and taken up one small aspect of the book, whereas the book is actually full of praise for Krishnamurti, but he has not focused on that.
I'll send you a copy of the review so that you can look at it and maybe respond accordingly. Yeah.
Could you send it to me as well, please?
I'll do that.
I want to respond until it is officially.
Would you please announce the lecture? Dubey sir, would you please announce the lecture for next Sunday by Javier?
Okay. So next Sunday, we have our lecture at 11 a.m. and Javier from Amsterdam has agreed to talk to us. This will be on Krishna's booklet on meditation. So I'll request all of you to kindly spare some time and be with us at 11 o'clock next Sunday. And I want to thank Roshan ji once again for being with us today. And maybe we'll contact her again in future to say something about the traditional religion, because she has written a number of books on Upanishad and Hinduism and so on. So I think it will be interesting to hear that as well. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dubey sir. Thank you. Thanks to
Thank you, everybody. Yeah.
Who came here. Thank you.
Thanks to all. Kamleshji, please close it.
Okay.